I think they are one of the best things to build a compost pile out of. Should we talk about compost just a little bit?
What type of wood chips are they?
Bird?
Man.
Okay, so there's a few things here. Ramial wood chips, compost, bacterial fungal dynamics in the soil, symbiosis. I'm afraid to say too much because I'm afraid Todd will correct me when I'm wrong. If I'm basically taking Elaine's work to the best of my ability and repeating it. So if I'm incorrect, please feel free to interject. People are familiar with weeds. You've heard of weeds? Pigweed, lamb quarter, gallon soda. Plants that nature thinks should grow there instead of the ones you're trying to grow there. So there's this thing called a bacterial fungal continuum. This is like I just said, the work of Owen and Elaine Ingham, who's I don't know, I think been on the cutting edge of this kind of information for decades. One of the first PhDs to acknowledge that bacteria weren't just bad and fungi weren't just bad. There's a whole ecosystem going on down here. So we call this continuum a bacterial fungal continuum. This is 1-to-1. An even amount of bacteria and fungi in the soil. Over here is 1,000,000 to 1. And this is 1-to-1,000,000. So this is a bacterially dominated ecosystem. This is a fungally dominated ecosystem, and this is a balanced bacterial fungal biomass ecosystem. So I'd like to use an example of like a volcanic eruption. I think last year in one of the Hawaiian Islands there was a volcanic eruption. I'm not sure if anybody was aware of this. I checked my news on Google News, and like there was always an article about the lava flow that was coming down the hill. Remember this? It's crossing the cemetery. It's gonna get to the road. Oh, it's crossed the cemetery. I'm not sure if anybody was like every single day it was like breaking news about the lava flow on Kauai or something. Anyways, my understanding is that if you were to take that fresh lava that came out of the volcano and it just cooled, give it a week, give it 2 weeks, give it a month, and you were to come in and do a microbiological assay of that environment, you'd have a bacterially dominant ecosystem. You'd have almost everything that was living there would be bacteria at that point in time. Correct me if I'm wrong. And if you waited 500 years and came back, you'd have a tropical rainforest, which would be so the first raw rock looks like this. Tropical rainforest looks like this. Right? It's an absolutely totally fungally dominated ecosystem. And so my understanding is that there's a natural progression of soil. If you don't do anything to it, if you just let it be, from bacterial dominance to fungal dominance. What's interesting here is that there's different species of plants that eat the byproducts of bacteria or fungi more or less. Some plants work well with lots of bacteria in the soil. Some plants work well with lots of fungi in the soil. And my understanding of weeds, what we call weeds, pigweed, lamb's quarter, a lot of these early adapter plants, is their job is to cover bare soil. Their job is when that soil is disturbed to get in there and keep it covered because nature does not like bare soil. And what happens when you till the soil, when you disturb soil, is you destroy the biological ecosystem. My metaphor for this is a rototiller down, what's a big road in New York City? Madison Avenue or Broadway? Anybody ever down one of those big roads in New York City? Right? Like 40 feet wide, 50 feet wide, big thoroughfare. Imagine that you took a rototiller that was to scale down Madison Avenue. It was a 40-foot wide rototiller, big tractor. Maybe it would be, tilling down 3 or 4 feet deep, to scale. You've got all these little organisms that live in their little boxes, right? And you're not going to necessarily kill too many of them with the tines of the rototiller. Some of them may get killed. But when you do till up Madison Avenue 3 or 4 feet deep, what's going to happen is you're going to rip up the water mains and the sewer mains and the gas lines and the internet lines. You may hit the subway, probably not. But the infrastructure that supports the life of all these millions of little bacteria in their boxes is going to be destroyed. Right? What's going to be the population density there 2 weeks later? Like if all the roads if that one road gets tilled up, if a bunch of roads get tilled up, right? The infrastructure that allows these organisms to live so closely together is destroyed. Where are they going to poop? Where are they going to get their water? How are they going to keep their food, cool in the fridge? There's going to be a massive population decline based on that disturbance. Does that make sense? So my understanding is that's functionally what happens when you till the soil. When you till the soil, all the networks that facilitate air and water and food and everything else, that ecosystem gets shredded, and you have a massive population die-off. I like to say, if you haven't committed genocide recently and you really feel the need to knock out a few billion organisms, take the rototiller out, go for a 15-minute spin, and you can, take a nap knowing that you have been responsible for the death of billions of organisms. I'm pretty sure that's a fact. I mean, that's like not too controversial. What happens is when you do cause this mass die-off, then eventually there is a repopulation because nature does not like a vacuum. The fungi that are basically these big, long, filamentous, webby people take a lot longer to reestablish than the bacteria do. The bacteria are single-celled organisms. They pop, 2 hours later, pop another one. And you'll actually have a bacterial flush much earlier than you will have a fungal reestablishment, even if the spores are present in the environment. So what happens is, after you till the soil, you have a bacterial flush. And the plants that flourish in that environment, the plants that have evolved to eat the byproducts of bacterial digestion, are the ones who grow. So when you till your soil, anybody maybe done this or put some compost down, and the weeds take off, like the pigweed is just like rocking, right? That lamb's quarter is looking really good. And when I was a kid, my mother used to say, "Look how fertile our soil is. See how well the weeds are growing." The stories we tell ourselves. We have created an environment where the pigweed will flourish. If you're growing carrots, and carrots prefer a more fungally dominant ecosystem, and you've got a bacterially dominant ecosystem because you just tilled the soil, you basically put your finger on the scale and create an environment where the carrots are going to have a hard time flourishing. I'm not sure if anyone's had this experience of weeding carrots, but I've had this perverse experience of planting my carrots and having them outcompete the weeds in the past couple of years because of how I manage my soil, which is totally, you want to talk about what? I broadcast my arugula and it outcompetes the weeds, right? I'm just there cutting my arugula and I can see the weeds down there. They're down there, they're like, 2 little leaves on the bottom, on the ground, at ground level. But at 2 inches where I'm cutting the arugula, there's no weeds. It's almost completely, perfectly, weed-free, never weeded it, broadcasted it, it's like a map across the bed. When you do this minimal tillage thing, when you don't screw up the microbiology, the plants that prefer a fungal dominant ecosystem seem to flourish. So this is my understanding, is there's different species of plants that flourish in different environments. And the plants we call weeds, the things that, in an annual situation at least, are the ones who germinate in a disturbed environment and keep the soil covered initially, are the ones who prefer a bacterially dominant ecosystem. So one of the best ways to get weeds is to till your soil. One of the best ways to not get weeds is to minimize the tillage of your soil. Another good way to get weeds is to add a bacterially dominant compost. And this is what a lot of people do when they make compost. They don't understand that the feedstocks, what you build your compost pile out of, has a lot to do with the ratio of bacteria to fungi in your compost pile. So ramial wood chips are one of the best things to put in a compost pile if you want a fungally dominant compost. So when you build compost, and I'm not a specialist in compost, I know there's some basic rudiments to it. It's about the carbon-nitrogen balance, basically. You want so much green and so much brown. But people don't necessarily discern between your sources of brown. So my understanding is that wood, lignified carbon, wood, like sticks, twigs, sawdust, wood chips, anything that's actually wood, not leaves, because leaves aren't wood, but any woody material is unable to be broken down by bacteria and can only be digested by fungi. And so when your compost pile is done composting, you will have a fungal dominance simply because they were the ones that were last in there, because they were the only ones who could finish digesting the wood. So ramial wood chips are chips from branches less than 3 inches in diameter or less than 2 inches in diameter, sort of brush, basically. Anything that's too small to be firewood.